There is a difference, vast and often invisible, between living and merely existing. To live is to engage fully with the present, to align your choices with virtue, to carry each day as if it were both a gift and a duty. To exist, on the other hand, is to drift through time like a stone carried downstream, breathing, eating, working, yet never truly alive. The Stoics understood this chasm, and they warned us not to mistake the mechanics of survival for the art of living. Seneca, in one of his letters, wrote sharply, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." These words are not just a reminder of mortality, but a mirror held to our routines. Are we living deliberately, or are we sleepwalking through days that vanish like smoke? To answer this question, the Stoics asked us to examine the quality of our attention. The man who exists moves from task to task, thought to thought, always in haste, but never in depth. He wakes, eats, works, distracts himself, and sleeps again, believing that the cycle itself is life. But Marcus Aurelius looked at this cycle with suspicion. In his meditations, he asked himself, "Do not act as if you had 10,000 years to throw away. Death stands at your elbow. Be good while life is still yours." For Marcus, the distinction was clear. To exist is to waste time on trivialities. To live is to use time as though it were borrowed. Existing is passive. It is letting external forces determine the shape of your days. Living is active. It is choosing with intention, even when the choice is small. Epictetus, the former slave turned philosopher, understood this deeply. He told his students, "First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do." The man who exists never defines himself, never names his aim. He reacts, drifts, obeys the pull of others. The man who lives sets direction, even if the sea is rough. His life is not perfect, but it is his own. One of the greatest dangers of existing is that it feels deceptively comfortable. To live requires effort, courage, reflection. To exist requires only routine. And routine, though comforting, can quietly hollow out a life. Seneca mocked those who counted their years but could not point to a single day truly lived. He said, "They live as if they were to live forever, and they live as if they might die tomorrow." This contradiction still traps us today. We hoard time like misers, planning for decades we may never see, yet we squander hours as though they cost nothing. To live is to break this contradiction by giving weight to every moment. But the Stoics were not asking us to abandon daily tasks or to chase constant excitement. They knew that life is full of duties, labors, and ordinary hours. Their challenge was subtler, to infuse even the ordinary with purpose. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to wash, eat, and sleep with dignity, to govern his empire while remembering that he too would die. In this way, living becomes not about grand gestures, but about awareness. You can live more fully in 1 hour of mindful action than in years of mechanical repetition. So how do we begin to see the difference? By looking at the fruits of our days. The man who merely exists reaches evening exhausted but empty, unable to recall anything of value accomplished. The man who lives reaches evening tired but fulfilled, able to point to choices that reflected his values. This difference is invisible to the crowd but decisive for the soul. The Stoics called this alignment with nature, the art of living in harmony with reason, with virtue, with the present. Existing is discord, living is harmony. The Stoics also remind us that existing is rooted in fear, while living is rooted in courage. The man who exists avoids risk, avoids reflection, avoids confrontation. He clings to comfort, fearing the uncertainty of deliberate living. The man who lives accepts uncertainty as the very arena of growth. Epictetus scolded his students who hesitated to act. How long will you wait before you demand the best of yourself? Existing delays endlessly, living begins now. Thus the Stoic challenge confronts us. Are you living or are you merely existing? Do your days pass as possessions of your own, or as debts owed to distraction, fear, and routine? The answer is not abstract. It is written in your habits, in your attention, in your choices. The first step is awareness, to see that there is a difference at all. For most, never ask. They breathe, they age, they die, having never truly lived. But the Stoic asks, daily, insistently, urgently. For to them, the tragedy is not death. It is to never have lived before it arrives. If existing is drifting without direction, then distraction is the current that carries us away. The Stoics saw distraction as one of the greatest thieves of life, for it steals not only hours but clarity, not only attention but purpose. Seneca, who lived surrounded by the noise of Rome, warned that men are frugal in guarding their wealth but reckless in squandering their time. You act as though you were destined to live forever, he said, yet you waste time as if you had more than enough. For Seneca, distraction was not innocent, it was fatal. To exist in distraction is to let life slip through your hands unnoticed, a death by 1,000 wasted moments. In our age, distraction wears new masks, endless screens, endless scrolling, endless noise. Yet the essence has not changed since Rome. Distraction is any force that scatters the mind, making it impossible to engage deeply with the present. The Stoic does not condemn rest, joy, or play. He condemns the mindless consumption of hours with nothing to show but fatigue. Existing means surrendering to this tyranny. Living means reclaiming sovereignty over your attention. Marcus Aurelius often scolded himself in his meditations for being tempted by trivialities. As emperor, he had every excuse to indulge in spectacle, gossip, and luxury. Yet he reminded himself, you will never be happy if you are disturbed by every passing thing. Control your mind, for it is within your power. Living, for Marcus, was an act of concentration. To exist in distraction was to fracture the soul into pieces, each enslaved by the latest sensation. Distraction is seductive because it mimics rest. When you scroll, gossip, or drift, you feel entertained, even relaxed. But Seneca warned that such relaxation is counterfeit. Real rest strengthens, distraction weakens. After hours lost in distraction, the mind is not restored but more restless. This is why existing feels exhausting even when we are doing nothing. Living, by contrast, leaves us tired but renewed because our energy has been spent on what matters. The Stoics also recognized that distraction is often rooted in fear. Why do we avoid silence? Why do we seek constant noise? Because silence confronts us with ourselves, with mortality, with the brevity of time. Seneca pointed out that most men flee into busyness not because they value work, but because they dread reflection. Existing means hiding from truth behind distraction. Living means facing truth, even when it unsettles. Epictetus, whose life began in slavery, knew how precious attention was. He urged his students to guard it fiercely. You become what you give your attention to, he taught. If you give it to gossip, you become shallow. If you give it to fear, you become timid. If you give it to virtue, you become strong. Existing means scattering attention on whatever appears. Living means choosing where to place it. This act of choosing, repeated daily, is the difference between a wasted life and a meaningful one. But how does one resist the tyranny of distraction? The Stoics prescribe discipline, not in grand gestures but in daily practices. Marcus Aurelius began his mornings reminding himself of mortality, anchoring his day before distractions could seize it. Seneca practiced nightly reflection, reviewing how he had spent his time, exposing wasted hours so they would not be repeated. Epictetus insisted on constant awareness of what is in our control, a reminder that distractions lose their power once we recognize they are external, not essential. These practices remain as urgent now as they were in Rome. Distraction also corrodes relationships. The false friend thrives on it, filling your hours with trivial talk, empty amusement, shallow activities that leave you emptier than before. The true friend, by contrast, sharpens your attention, draws you back to purpose, reminds you of what matters. This is why the Stoics urged careful choice of companions. Associate with those who may improve you, Marcus advised, and welcome those whom you yourself can improve. Living requires surrounding yourself with those who respect your attention. Existing means surrendering it to whoever demands it. The tyranny of distraction is subtle because it rarely feels dangerous. Few men realize they are dying from it. The gambler knows his addiction, the drunkard knows his vice, but the distracted man believes he is simply passing time. Yet Seneca warned that while we are postponing, life speeds by. To postpone living for distraction is to gamble with the only resource you cannot renew. The Stoic lives with urgency not because he fears death, but because he refuses to waste life. Living, then, is not about rejecting all pleasure, but about filtering it. The Stoic enjoys what is noble, purposeful, restorative. He rejects what scatters, weakens, or consumes without return. Marcus enjoyed philosophy, duty, even small joys of family. Seneca enjoyed writing, reading, and reflection. Epictetus enjoyed teaching. None of them despised joy. They despised distraction. For joy is rooted in presence, while distraction is rooted in escape. To live is to pursue joy. To exist is to chase escape. So the Stoic asks, how are you spending your attention? Are you using it to build, or are you scattering it like sand in the wind? Do you live each day with a sense of substance or with a vague exhaustion that cannot be explained? The answer reveals whether you are living or merely existing. To guard your attention is to guard your life, for you become what you attend to. Thus, the second Stoic insight is this: beware the tyranny of distraction. To exist is to hand your attention to every noise, every temptation, every passing amusement. To live is to claim your attention as your own, to direct it with reason, to filter it with virtue. The distracted man may breathe and move, but he does not live. The attentive man, even in silence, even in hardship, is fully alive. For he knows that life is not measured in years, but in moments truly lived. If distraction is the thief of life, then time is its currency. And yet, paradoxically, men treat gold with reverence while squandering hours as though they were worthless. The Stoics returned again and again to this theme, for they saw how easily people confuse existing with living simply because their hearts still beat. Seneca put it with merciless clarity: it is not that we have a short life, but that we waste much of it. Life is long if you know how to use it. To exist is to count years. To live is to weigh moments. Time, unlike wealth, cannot be regained once lost. This truth, simple and brutal, should inspire urgency. But most flee from it. They plan endlessly for the future while neglecting the present. They complain of how quickly years pass while throwing away days in idle chatter, in pursuits they do not love, in obligations they do not question. Seneca mocked this contradiction. Men guard their estates but let others waste their time freely. They resent a thief who steals coins but smile at the friend who steals hours with gossip. The Stoic recognizes this as madness. For money lost can be regained, time lost is buried forever. Marcus Aurelius urged himself daily to remember that death stood near. Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good. To him, the awareness of mortality was not despair, but fuel. It sharpened his use of time, turning each day into an opportunity for virtue. The man who merely exists postpones, saying tomorrow to every act of courage, discipline, or honesty. The man who lives says today, for tomorrow is smoke. Time is also the measure of attention. Existing means scattering time on what others demand. Living means spending it deliberately on what aligns with reason and virtue. Epictetus taught his students to evaluate every action with a single question: What will I gain by doing this? What will I lose if I do not? He urged them to count, not in money, but in time, for every choice is an exchange. When you waste an hour in distraction, you do not lose nothing. You lose an irreplaceable fragment of your existence. The Stoics also remind us that wasting time is not only about idleness, it is also about misdirected busyness. Many men are frantically active yet accomplish nothing meaningful. They fill their schedules with trivialities, rushing from one obligation to another, believing they are living fully. But Seneca called this busy idleness. To exist in busyness is to exhaust yourself in movement without direction, to be like a man digging trenches only to fill them again. Living, by contrast, is not about motion, but about purpose. 1 hour of purposeful work outweighs a lifetime of frantic activity. Consider also how fear of death distorts our relationship with time. The man who exists avoids thinking about mortality, treating it as an intruder he hopes to evade. The Stoic, by contrast, keeps death close, using it as a reminder of urgency. Seneca advised practicing the thought of death daily, so that when it arrives, it does not surprise. Marcus went further, urging himself to treat each day as a complete life in miniature. To him, a single day lived with virtue was a victory over death. This perspective transforms time from a threat into a tool. And yet, the tragedy is that most people live as if they had infinite reserves. They postpone reflection, saying, I will live with discipline when I am older, I will study philosophy when I have leisure, I will seek truth when I retire. But time is never guaranteed. Epictetus scolded those who waited. How long will you wait before you demand of yourself the best? To exist is to postpone endlessly, to live is to begin now. The Stoics also recognized that how you spend time reveals what you value. If you give hours to trivial gossip but claim to value wisdom, you are a hypocrite. If you dedicate days to empty pleasures but say you seek virtue, you lie to yourself. Seneca insisted that our schedules expose our souls. To know whether you live or merely exist, look not at your intentions but at your calendar. Where your time goes, there goes your life. True living, then, requires ruthless clarity about time. It is not enough to acknowledge its brevity. You must structure your days with awareness. The Stoics practiced nightly reflection, asking, what did I do with my time today? Did I waste it or did I invest it? They began mornings with meditation on mortality, anchoring their choices in the awareness that this day could be the last. These practices are not morbid, but liberating. For the one who is aware of time's brevity uses it well, while the one who pretends it is infinite wastes it in fantasies. To live is to treat time as sacred. It is to measure not by how much you consume, but by how much you become. It is to ask daily, if this were my last day, would I be content with how I spent it? To exist is to avoid this question, to drift in unconsciousness, to assume there will always be more. The Stoic refuses this delusion. He sees each sunrise as borrowed, each sunset as final, and between them he strives to live rather than merely to last. Thus, the third Stoic insight is this: life is not measured in years, but in the quality of time used. To exist is to let time slip unnoticed, to treat it as an endless stream. To live is to hold it as a precious coin, to spend it deliberately on virtue, reflection, and purpose. Remember Seneca's warning: life is long if you know how to use it. Do not wait for decades to reveal whether you lit it. Begin now, in this hour, for this hour is life. Existing is easy because it requires no courage. One can drift, obeying habit, avoiding reflection, surrendering to the flow of others' expectations. But to live requires choice, and choice demands courage. The Stoics saw this as the central battle of human life, whether we will live according to reason and virtue, or whether we will let fear and inertia dictate our path. Epictetus asked his students a piercing question: how long will you wait before you demand of yourself the best? Waiting is existing. Choosing is living. The cowardice of existing is subtle. It hides in small compromises, in the refusal to confront what you know to be wrong, in the postponement of the difficult but necessary. A man may exist for decades in a job he hates, in a relationship that corrodes him, in habits that drain him, simply because he fears the discomfort of change. Seneca warned against this paralysis, writing that men cling to what is familiar, not because it is good, but because it is easy. He compared it to sailors clinging to a sinking ship simply because they dread the uncertainty of the sea. The ship sinks anyway, and they die clinging to what was destroying them. Living, by contrast, means acting with courage in the face of uncertainty. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the task of life was not comfort but virtue. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. These simple words require immense courage, for they set a standard that defies convenience. To live is to choose truth over ease, justice over approval, discipline over indulgence. To exist is to collapse at the first pressure of fear or desire. Courage, for the Stoics, was not recklessness. It was not leaping blindly, but choosing deliberately in the face of fear. Epictetus insisted that fear itself is an impression, not a fact. What frightens us is not the event, but our judgment of it. To live, then, is to judge rightly. When others avoid risk because they fear embarrassment, the Stoic asks, is embarrassment truly the harm? When others avoid honesty because they fear rejection, the Stoic asks, is rejection worse than falsehood? This clarity turns fear into an opportunity for choice. The tragedy of existing is that it often feels safe. You avoid risk, you avoid pain, you avoid conflict, and you think you are secure. But in truth, you are wasting life itself. Seneca told Lucilius that men fear death, but waste their lives avoiding what would make them truly alive. They lose the day in expectation of the night, and the night in fear of the dawn. Existing means postponing choice until life itself makes the choice for you. Living means embracing choice as the essence of freedom. Consider how this applies in ordinary life. A student exists when he passively drifts through his studies, doing the minimum, never asking what he truly seeks. He lives when he chooses to pursue knowledge as a shaping force of character. A worker exists when he labors mechanically, counting hours until relief. He lives when he chooses to see his work as service, as practice, as discipline. A parent exists when he goes through motions of provision without reflection. He lives when he chooses to raise his child with presence, with wisdom, with love. In every sphere, the difference is the same. Existence is default, living is decision. Marcus Aurelius gave himself this command: at dawn, when you rise unwillingly, think, I am rising to the work of a man. Why am I dissatisfied if I am going to do the very things for which I was born? This is the Stoic courage of choice, to rise each day with purpose rather than resignation. Existing means rolling out of bed reluctantly, carried by obligation. Living means rising deliberately, guided by the knowledge that each day is a field in which virtue must be sown. But courage does not mean the absence of fear. The Stoics never pretended that fear vanishes. Instead, they taught that fear must be mastered. Seneca described courage as not the lack of fear, but the triumph over it. He admired those who, though trembling, still acted rightly. For him, the man who feels no fear is not brave but insensible. True courage belongs to the one who feels fear but does not obey it. Living requires this kind of courage daily, not in grand heroic acts, but in small decisions to confront discomfort, to embrace responsibility, to reject the easy lie in favor of the hard truth. The cost of avoiding choice is enormous. When you refuse to choose, you think you are delaying risk, but you are already paying the price. Your life dissolves in hesitation. Epictetus mocked those who said they would begin to live tomorrow. He said, Do you not understand that you are dying today? Existing means saying later. Living means saying now. The man who waits for courage will never find it, for courage is not discovered in safety, but in action. Thus, the fourth Stoic insight is this: to live is to choose courage daily, to refuse the cowardice of mere existence. Ask yourself, what choices are you postponing out of fear? What truths are you refusing to face? What responsibilities are you neglecting? The answers reveal whether you are alive or merely drifting. Remember Seneca's warning: it is not that we have a short life, but that we waste much of it. To waste it in hesitation is the greatest waste of all. To live is to act, and to act with courage is to embrace life itself. Now some exciting news. Our channel now offers a members club. By joining it, you'll unlock exclusive benefits, deeper content dives, and personal insights. Join us on this journey, and let's build a meaningful life together. And I also humbly ask you to leave a comment, as it helps my channel immensely. If you do not know what to comment, just write "better every day" so I know you reached this far. And don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Also, I've linked some books on Stoicism that helped me become the man I am today and will also help you achieve a Stoic mindset. To live, the Stoics insisted, is to live with purpose. Existing is to move without direction, to act without reflection, to fill days with activity that leads nowhere. The difference is not always visible from the outside, for both the living and the merely existing rise, eat, work, and sleep. But the living man knows why. The existing man does not ask. Seneca warned that to be everywhere is to be nowhere. He saw in this frenzy of purposeless motion the very essence of wasted life. Without purpose, all activity becomes noise. With purpose, even silence becomes meaningful. Purpose, for the Stoics, was not an abstract dream, but a daily discipline. Marcus Aurelius began each morning reminding himself of his role: a man, a citizen, a philosopher, a servant of the common good. At dawn, when you rise unwillingly, he wrote, think, I am rising to the work of a human being. This is not poetic flourish. It is discipline. It is the refusal to let the day drift without aim. The man who exists wakes and drifts. The man who lives wakes and chooses. The tragedy of existing is that it often masquerades as productivity. You can fill every hour with tasks and yet accomplish nothing of worth. Seneca mocked those who boast of being busy but cannot say what they are busy for. They are not busy, they are just preoccupied. This preoccupation without purpose is the hallmark of existing. The Stoic, by contrast, filters his actions through purpose. He asks, does this align with virtue? Does it serve my role as a rational being? Does it leave me better than before? If the answer is no, he discards it. Epictetus drilled this discipline into his students. He told them to examine every impression, every impulse, every proposed action with a single test. Is this within my control? Is this in harmony with nature? Purpose, in Stoic terms, means living in accordance with reason, accepting what is outside control, and acting wisely within what is. The man who exists chases outcomes. The man who lives focuses on actions. This shift transforms chaos into clarity. Purpose also protects against despair. When life becomes difficult, the one without purpose collapses, for he has no reason to endure. The Stoic endures because he knows why he must. Marcus Aurelius, facing war, betrayal, and plague, never surrendered to nihilism. He wrote, a man should stand erect, not be held erect. Purpose gave him spine. Without it, even the smallest hardship becomes unbearable. With it, even great suffering becomes bearable, for it is endured in service of something higher. But how does one find purpose? The Stoics did not promise an easy answer. They insisted it begins with self-examination. Epictetus urged each man to ask, who do I wish to be? What kind of person do I wish to become? Purpose is not found in external roles or titles, but in the cultivation of character. It is the decision to live in harmony with reason, to act justly, to speak truthfully, to endure bravely. These are not lofty ideals, but daily practices. The Stoic finds purpose in being fully human, not in chasing grandiose dreams. Seneca also warned that purpose must be chosen, not inherited. Many men adopt the goals of their society, their parents, or their peers without question. They pursue wealth, fame, or comfort simply because others do. This is not purpose, it is imitation. The man who lives must choose consciously, asking whether the ends he pursues are worthy of a rational being. Seneca wrote, "If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable." To live is to choose your port and steer toward it daily, adjusting the sails with reason. Purpose also brings peace. The man who exists is tossed by every opinion, swayed by every criticism, distracted by every temptation. The man who lives with purpose is anchored. He knows what matters, so he can ignore what does not. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often to ignore what does not belong to you. This is the freedom of purpose, the ability to say no to the trivial, because you have already said yes to the essential. Yet, purpose is not static. The Stoics acknowledged that life changes, and with it, our roles. What matters is not rigid adherence to a single plan, but constancy in principle. Whether as a soldier, a statesman, a parent, or a philosopher, the Stoic asks, am I acting with virtue? Am I fulfilling my role as a rational being? This constancy in principle allows flexibility in action. It is how Marcus could rule an empire without becoming enslaved by it, and how Epictetus could teach freedom while living in chains. To live with purpose also requires solitude. Seneca valued time alone, not to escape the world, but to clarify his own mind. Without solitude, we absorb the purposes of others without reflection. We become echoes, not voices. The Stoic retreats inward to ask, is this truly my path? Am I living deliberately or drifting unconsciously? This inner audit is essential. Without it, we become what the crowd demands, not what reason dictates. Thus, the fifth Stoic insight is this: to live is to practice the discipline of purpose. It is to examine your actions, to align them with virtue, to reject the noise of imitation, and to anchor your days in conscious intention. Existing is to act without asking why. Living is to ask why before you act. Purpose does not make life easier, but it makes it meaningful. And meaning, for the Stoics, is the very essence of life. Existing often disguises itself under the veil of comfort. To drift along in safety, to avoid hardship, to seek ease in all things, this feels pleasant, even natural. But the Stoics warned that too much comfort is not life but slow decay. Seneca wrote with sharpness, "Softness comes to us from prosperity, adversities summon our virtues." The man who exists clings to comfort. The man who lives uses discomfort as training. Comfort is not evil, but dependence on comfort is slavery. The trap of comfort is that it makes you mistake the absence of pain for the presence of life. You eat, you sleep, you entertain yourself, and because you feel no sharp suffering, you believe you are well. But Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that life was meant for more than the avoidance of pain. "Do not expect Plato's Republic," he wrote, "but be content if even the smallest thing is achieved." This meant that progress, growth, and virtue required effort. Comfort lulls us into expecting ease, but ease rarely produces strength. Epictetus taught his students through practice. He urged them to embrace voluntary discomfort, to go without luxury, to sleep on hard surfaces, to eat simple meals, so that they would not be enslaved by softness. "If you would improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid," he said. What he meant was that growth demands sacrifice, and sacrifice often looks strange to those who exist only for ease. The man who trains himself in discomfort discovers freedom, for he no longer fears hardship. The man who avoids discomfort at all costs becomes fragile, breaking at the slightest strain. Comfort also blinds us to the brevity of life. When days flow easily, we forget their scarcity. Seneca warned that leisure without purpose is wasted, that idleness disguised as rest erodes the soul. True leisure, he insisted, is found not in comfort but in philosophy, in reflection, in the cultivation of virtue. To live is to use leisure to grow. To exist is to use leisure to escape. The difference lies not in how we rest, but in why. Consider how comfort shapes modern existence. Technology promises ease, abundance promises indulgence, entertainment promises distraction. None of these are evil in themselves, but dependence on them creates chains. If your peace depends on constant comfort, then your peace is fragile. The Stoics aimed for the opposite, a peace unshaken by circumstance. Marcus Aurelius faced cold, war, and sickness, yet he reminded himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." True living is found in mastery of the mind, not in perfecting conditions. Comfort also dulls gratitude. When every need is met effortlessly, we forget to value what we have. Epictetus warned that men become arrogant when they confuse abundance with worth. By practicing discomfort, fasting, enduring cold, embracing silence, the Stoic renews gratitude for simple blessings. Bread tastes sweeter after hunger, warmth feels richer after cold. To exist in constant comfort is to numb the senses, to live with chosen discomfort is to awaken them. But the greatest danger of comfort is that it kills ambition of the soul. Not ambition for wealth or status, but ambition for virtue, for growth, for greatness of character. Seneca lamented those who drift into old age, having never tested themselves, never endured hardship, never risen above ease. It is not death we should fear, he said, but never beginning to live. Comfort whispers that survival is enough. The Stoic counters that living means striving, even if the striving hurts. The trap of comfort is revealed when adversity inevitably comes. The man who has trained in discomfort greets it calmly, even gratefully, for he knows it as a familiar teacher. The man who has existed only in comfort collapses, resentful and broken. Marcus urged himself to welcome hardship as material for virtue. Like a wrestler grateful for an opponent, the Stoic thanks fate for challenges, knowing they reveal strength. The man who lives sees discomfort as proof he is alive. The man who exists hides from it until it overwhelms him. So how do we escape the trap? By practicing voluntary hardship. The Stoics recommended simple exercises. Walk in the cold without complaint. Fast from luxury. Deny yourself unnecessary indulgences. These practices do not aim at suffering for its own sake, but at freedom. They remind us that life is not dependent on external ease. If you can be content with little, then you can never be enslaved by much. Living means cultivating resilience. Existing means clinging to comfort until it rots into weakness. Thus, the sixth Stoic insight is this: beware the trap of comfort. To exist is to seek ease above all, mistaking survival for life. To live is to embrace hardship as training, to use discomfort as a whetstone for character, to cultivate gratitude through discipline. Remember Seneca's challenge: softness comes to us from prosperity, adversity summons our virtues. If ye have lived only in comfort, ye have not truly lived at all. For life is not defined by how gently it carries you, but by how bravely you carry it. Nothing separates living from merely existing as clearly as our relationship with death. The man who exists avoids the thought of mortality, drifting through life as though it were endless. He busies himself with distractions, comforts, and trivial pursuits, pretending that tomorrow is guaranteed. The Stoics saw this avoidance as the very essence of wasted life. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we fear death, but that we fear never having begun to live." To live, then, is not to deny death, but to look at it directly and let it sharpen the present. Marcus Aurelius returned to this theme constantly in his meditations. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. These words are not despairing, they are liberating. For Marcus, the awareness of death was not a shadow that darkened the day, but a mirror that illuminated it. To remember that death is near is to see each moment as precious, each choice as decisive, each day as a complete life in miniature. The man who exists postpones virtue, believing there will be time later. The man who lives acts today, knowing later may never come. Epictetus taught his students to rehearse death daily, not to wallow in fear, but to free themselves from illusion. He urged them to kiss their loved ones with the reminder that they are mortal, to approach possessions with the knowledge they may vanish, to face each sunrise with gratitude that it came at all. When you kiss your child, he said, say silently, tomorrow you may die. To modern ears, this sounds cold, but for the Stoics, it was warmth in its highest form, because it made love urgent, gratitude intense, presence unavoidable. To exist is to love carelessly, assuming tomorrow. To live is to love fiercely, knowing tomorrow may never arrive. The avoidance of death is the hallmark of existing. Men waste years because they believe they have many. They accumulate possessions they will never use, postpone dreams they will never pursue, and endure miseries they will never escape, all because they believe time is infinite. Seneca scorned this folly. You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire. We fear death as if it were certain tomorrow, yet we desire endlessly as if we had forever. The Stoic path exposes this contradiction and demands that we resolve it by facing death honestly. When you live with death in mind, choices clarify. Trivial insults lose power, for who waiteth a day in anger when days are few? Petty ambitions lose luster, for who craves applause that vanishes with the grave? Luxury loses glamour, for who builds palaces when they cannot follow him to dust? Marcus Aurelius asked himself again and again, will this matter on my deathbed? If not, why waste time on it now? This question is a blade that cuts through distraction, revealing the marrow of living. But the Stoics also saw death as more than a clarifier. They saw it as a teacher of courage. To live is to act despite death, to refuse to let fear of the inevitable paralyze you. Epictetus reminded his students that death is not evil, for it is natural. Death is nothing dreadful, but the dread of death is dreadful. The man who exists is enslaved by dread, always postponing, always clinging. The man who lives accepts death as part of nature and therefore acts freely. For if death cannot harm the soul, then nothing can. This acceptance transforms suffering itself. Seneca urged his readers to view each day as a gift already received. To complain about its brevity is to be ungrateful for the gift at all. Life is long if you know how to use it. Death, far from being an enemy, is the reminder that makes life urgent, sharp, vivid. Without it, we would drift forever. With it, we are called to live now. Consider how differently two men respond to mortality. The one who exists avoids the thought, investing his energy in distraction, convinced that death is distant. When it comes, he is unprepared, and his life dissolves into regret. The one who lives greets death as an old companion, not with eagerness, but with readiness. He has lived each day as if it were complete, and so death cannot rob him of anything, because nothing was postponed. The Stoic aimed to be like this second man, walking with death not as a terror, but as a guide. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire in constant turmoil, still found comfort in this view. He reminded himself that emperors and slaves alike meet the same end, and that the only difference is whether they lived in virtue before the end arrived. Alexander the Great and his mule driver both died and came to the same end. To the Stoic, titles, riches, and legacies are illusions. What remains is whether you lived or whether you merely existed. Death makes this judgment with impartial clarity. Thus, the seventh Stoic insight is this: let death be your mirror. Existing means hiding from mortality, wasting time as though it were infinite. Living means facing mortality, using it to sharpen presence, courage, and gratitude. Do not flee from the thought of death, embrace it, for it is the reminder that frees you from delay, from triviality, from fear. The man who sees death clearly is the man who lives fully. The man who hides from death is the man who never truly lives at all. We have seen the difference between living and existing in many forms: the tyranny of distraction, the waste of time, the cowardice of postponed choice, the trap of comfort, the shadow of death. Each of these, the Stoics insisted, are signs that distinguish the man who lives deliberately from the man who merely survives. Now we must turn to the heart of the matter. What does it mean to truly live, according to Stoic philosophy? What is the art of living, and how do we practice it in the brief span we are given? Seneca described living as alignment with reason and virtue. He scorned those who measured life by length rather than depth. It is not how long you live, but how nobly you live, he declared. For him, life was not a series of breaths, but a series of choices, each moment an opportunity to act with wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. These were the four cardinal virtues, the compass by which the Stoics navigated existence. To live is to let these virtues shape every act. To exist is to let impulse, passion, or fear dictate them. Marcus Aurelius carried this into practice daily. As emperor, surrounded by temptation, flattery, and power, he still returned to simplicity. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. This is the art of living in its most distilled form. It does not require grand achievements or monumental legacies. It requires integrity in the smallest moments, honesty in speech, justice in action, discipline in appetite, courage in difficulty. Existing ignores these moments as trivial. Living understands that they are life itself. Epictetus gave another dimension: freedom. He taught that the art of living is found in mastering what is in our control and releasing what is not. The man who exists is enslaved to external events, tossed by fortune, broken by loss, inflated by gain. The man who lives recognizes that externals are indifferent. His true life lies in his judgments, choices, and character. "You may fetter my leg," Epictetus said, "but not even Zeus himself can overpower my will." This is the freedom of living, to carry sovereignty within, untouchable by circumstance. Living, then, is not measured in years, possessions, or applause. It is measured in sovereignty, in virtue, in presence. The man who lives owns his days. The man who exists leases them to distraction, fear, or convention. Seneca urged his readers to reclaim ownership of time, to withdraw from the crowd when necessary, to cultivate inner life. He believed that philosophy was not theory, but medicine, a treatment for the sickness of mere existence. To study Stoicism was to learn how to live before death arrived. But the art of living is not solitary. The Stoics also emphasized our role in the larger community. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "We are made for cooperation, like hands, like feet, like eyelids." To live is not to retreat into selfishness, but to fulfill one's role as part of the whole. Existing is self-centered, seeking only comfort and survival. Living is service, using one's strength for the common good. A man who lives truly does not ask only, "What will this bring me?" but "How does this serve the whole?" Such perspective transforms life from isolated struggle to shared purpose. Another element of the art of living is gratitude. Existing complains, always seeking more, never satisfied. Living rejoices in what is present, recognizing each day as a gift. Marcus, despite being emperor, trained himself to see ordinary blessings: the dawn, the cooperation of nature, the presence of family, the opportunity to act justly. Gratitude sharpened his awareness, turning every hour into treasure. Epictetus urged his students to give thanks even for hardship, for it trained the soul. To live is to be grateful, to exist is to be blind. The Stoics also practiced reflection as an essential tool of living. Seneca ended each day by reviewing his actions, asking where he had failed and where he had lived nobly. This nightly examination kept him awake to life, preventing drift. Existing means repeating the same errors unconsciously. Living means learning, correcting, growing. Reflection transforms time into wisdom. Without it, days vanish unexamined, and life dissolves into nothing. Finally, the art of living requires urgency. The Stoics did not promise endless days. They insisted that life was uncertain, fragile, and brief. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could live life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." To live is to act with this awareness. Not to panic, but to focus, to waste nothing, to love fiercely, to practice virtue while the chance remains. Existing postpones, assuming tomorrow. Living embraces today, knowing tomorrow may never arrive. So, are you living or merely existing? The answer is not in your years, but in your moments. Do you act with virtue? Do you guard your time? Do you embrace discomfort, reflect on mortality, and choose courage over fear? If so, you are living, even if your days are few. If not, you are merely existing, even if your years are many. Do not wait. Begin now. For existence ends with death, but true living leaves its mark on eternity. Now, if any part of this message has been helpful to you, leave us your like and comment, helping the algorithm recommend it to someone who needs it at this time. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos. And if you look through the videos we've already uploaded, you're sure to find something to take with you. Have a good day.